I'll be going through the setup quadrant of the Leica S2's menu system. To access the setup quadrant of the Leica S2's menu system, hit the bottom right button. Again, to scroll through the setup menu's 3 pages, click the setup right button here again 3 times, and I can scroll through the pages. The first option in the setup menu is data storage. By default, this is set to sequential. When in sequential, the Leica S2 will by default store images on the CF card in the camera. If an SD card is installed, the camera will fill up the compact flash card first, then begin storing images on the SD card. This is a great way to get a lot of storage inside the camera at one time. To change the data storage option, you have 2 other additional options here. Parallel will store a raw DNG image on the compact flash card and a JPEG image on the SD card. External stores images externally on a computer. This is the selection you'll want to use if you're shooting tethered. Next, image numbering. The S2 gives you 2 options when working with your files inside the camera. First, you can change the name of the folder that's on the memory card. You have access to the last 5 digits, either letters or numbers, of the folder name. As well as changing the folder name, you can actually change the first 4 digits of the file name that the camera puts on the memory card. Click in. You have access to both letters and numbers. This is great. You can put your initials or a job number or whatever you like. Lastly, if you've made a setting that you don't like, simply click Reset to go back to the camera's default folder name and file name settings. Next, format. You can format both your compact flash card, your SD card, individually, or format both cards at once. To format, simply click the scroll wheel, scroll over to Yes, and the card will be formatted. Anytime you put a new memory card in the camera, I'd recommend formatting it. Next, USB mode. By default, the camera is set to PTP, or point-to-point. However, in a pinch, if you don't have a card reader and you need to offload images onto your computer, you can change the setting to mass storage. The camera will act like a card reader for you. I'd only recommend doing this if you're really in a bind. Sensor cleaning flips open the mirror and opens the shutter, giving you access to the Leica's S2 sensor. You can use a blower bulb or cleaning swabs. However, when you're cleaning the sensor of the S2, be very careful as not to damage or scratch the sensor glass. Next, reset. This will reset the camera's functions to default settings. Next, click wheel exposure mode. By default, this is set on short push. To change shooting modes on the S2, like from aperture priority to program, normally simply a short click of the scroll wheel is required. However, this can make accidental changes quite easy when shooting in the field or on location. Therefore, we like to set the option to long push. When the camera is set to long push, it requires approximately a 1-second hold of the click wheel to change shooting modes. On the next page of the setup menu, you'll find Auto Review. Auto Review, by default, pops up an image for 5 seconds in playback mode after you've taken a picture. You can change the amount of time and histogram display in this menu. To change the duration, click on Duration. If you don't want to see an image after it's shot, select Off. If you want the image to stay on the screen for as long as possible, select Hold. In addition to setting the Auto Review duration, you can choose whether or not you want a histogram overlaid over the image when it's displayed. In the histogram menu, we have 4 options. Standard is a luminance histogram. RGB is a 3-color RGB histogram. With clipping, when the image is overexposed and has a blown out white area, it will blink red. When the image is underexposed and has a blocked up shadow area, it will blink blue. This is a quick and easy way to check if your image is under or overexposed, or if you're losing any detail. In Monitor and Display, the S2 gives you a variety of options to choose how the images will appear on the LCD screen. We like the default settings and find that they're closely matched to a computer monitor once the images are uploaded. However, you do have a few options to change depending on the kind of conditions you're shooting in. A really nifty feature in the backlight setting is the S2 has an ambient light sensor right here on the top corner of the LCD. When this is set to automatic, the LCD screen's backlight will change brightness depending on the ambient light you're shooting in. If I cover it with my thumb, you'll see the screen will dim as if I'm shooting in a lowly lit room. If I remove my thumb, our bright video lights bring the camera's backlight brightness up considerably. But again, we recommend the default setting of high. In addition, the default setting of medium for brightness. In addition to setting the back screen's brightness and backlight, you can control the top covers, both brightness, low, medium, or high, the standby time, which is how long the screen on the top will stay on before going blank. Auto power off will tell the camera when, if at all, to fall asleep after a period of inactivity. You can select 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or off. But be warned, if you have it set on off and you leave it in your camera bag powered on, it will stay on until the battery is drained. Acoustic signal. The camera will give you various acoustic signals, little beeps, that tell you whether there is a low battery, your memory card is full, or when you have autofocus confirmation. To control the volume of these audio signals, you can select low or high. To control whether the signal goes when you have autofocus lock, and when the camera gives you various warnings. Next, HDMI. This option gives you the ability to display a slideshow on an HDTV using an HDMI cable plugged into the side of the camera. You can select both the resolution and which images you want to display and how long you want to display them. Once you've done that, you can start the slideshow. Key lock is one of our favorite options. To activate key lock, click the scroll wheel, activate key lock. What key lock does is when turning the shutter speed and aperture dial on top of the camera, accidental changes are possible while shooting. Key lock locks both the shutter speed dial on the top and the aperture dial under your thumb, preventing accidental changes while shooting. In addition, to know when key lock is activated, a small red key icon will show up on the top color OLED panel, indicating that even if you turn the shutter speed or aperture dials, your settings will not change. We like to set key lock to a shortcut button on the front of the camera, normally reserved as a depth of field preview button. We'll get into that later. Custom functions allows you to set various functions of the 4 soft keys and the front depth of field preview button. We'll get into that later as well. AEAF lock. By default, the rear button under your thumb is set to AFL, or autofocus lock. This will lock the autofocus after you've achieved focus on a subject. Press and hold this button and the camera will not refocus until you release the button. AE lock is auto exposure lock. When you have an exposure you like, press and hold the rear button. The camera will not change the exposure until the button is released. To have both autofocus and auto exposure lock, select the last option. It's important to remember that if you're in manual focus mode and want to use the rear button to activate the autofocus instead of the shutter, you want to be in AFL, which is the default option. Zoom lock, which we'll talk about more in our playback features video, allows you to scroll through images while zoomed in on the Leica S2. The Leica S2 has various options for how to display and set date and time. You can choose both 12-hour and 24-hour format for the time, and you have options for the date setting as well. The Leica S2 comes preloaded with a wide variety of languages. By default, English, but if you see, we'll scroll through and there's a wide variety of language choices available. Lastly, but almost the most important, is the firmware settings for both camera and lens. Check the firmware version of the Leica S2's camera and lens to make sure you have access to the most recently updated features and functions.